this. Been in the covers lately. Ramble On, 1990 remaster. Steve Horney. Never know how to spell his name. I had to Google it.
Yeah, it's almost how you want it to be, but there's an E in there. What you gonna do?
Well, not that part. No, the first name. The first name.
Like,
I'm always like, is it PHEN or VEN?
it doesn't matter. Dude,
I
well,
know, it doesn't matter.
until
but
Steph Curry started dropping buckets. Everybody used to call me Steven, and now everyone calls me
nice,
Stephen.
Steph.
Whatever, I don't care.
Well, I Googled it. There's the Steve Horney PT on LinkedIn.
Bro,
And right under that is Steven with the PH.
exactly.
Owner of Flat Top Woodworks, for anyone.
Long lost uncle.
We sell furniture made in USA.
Good to know. Yeah, when your last name's Horny, you tend not to be too picky about first name stuff. Just
There's
kind of
another PHEN Horny on Instagram at Talking South. Only has 6 posts, so
brother.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So, guys, we're here to talk about making fitness simpler. And Steve and I both are physical therapists, physios to the rest of the world, not Americans. And also, I think we connected and bonded at some point. However, I don't even remember exactly how we got connected, through probably Richard Sinister, but it's just been such a natural friendship all this time that it's all so fluid and natural. But we really connected over this holistic piece to add to the physical therapy, the fitness, we also bonded over Dr. Ruscio's book. Is it Healthy Gut, Healthy You? And how we incorporate that into our own physical therapy practice and whatever we call. Did you come up with a new name for what you call your work with people?
Bro, okay. So I've been going, I know, this is like, isn't this great that this is our biggest problems, that we actually know our job well enough that we can get like wrapped up in semantic arguments and like conversations in our head. But I am really adopting the performance physical therapy because in a weird way, people are almost more likely to talk to their strength coach about their diet than they would be to their PT. So in an odd way, even if you just think about the things that enhance recovery, they tend to be the same things that enhance lifestyle and therefore make our job easier. So I'll still be like, if I get 2 blurbs, I'm going to be like, and I'm holistic too, but I'm going performance PT.
Nice.
And I feel like that gives me the avenue and gateway to get across what I want to get across.
Nice. I still love, and Kelly and Juliette Starrett just came out with a book, and they've kind of been using this term, but I got some pushback in using this as my primary, calling myself a physical retirement specialist, because I want to help you, 30 years from now.
Who has time to push back on stuff like
my
that?
wife.
Oh, I'm just kidding. She's beautiful and amazing.
Yeah. She's like, no, the people won't like the word retirement. A few other people, I'll say, also kind of like, yeah, the word retirement.
Longevity is like probably the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of these buzzwords, and that's the thing. Like, I health coach makes sense, right? But it just has all these other negative connotations because of these people selling mitochondrial supplements and all this stuff. So, anyone listening, if you're outside the world that we're talking about, we apologize, but. Let's get down to our main thesis here. And so I was just like, yeah, dude, it's been too long. We got to get some good stuff on paper here. So here we are. And Steve was like, let's talk about Steph. I should call him Steph. Said, and I got to say, your beard's outgrowing mine right now. You're winning.
This is having a new old house. This is what this looks like.
I love it. But yeah, we kind of converged and said, let's what do we want to talk about? I have this whole program coming out, Make Fitness Simple. And that was exactly what you wanted to talk about. So it was definitely a great confluence, convergence, whatever other C words we have. And so the idea here is, and I was telling you on the phone earlier when we were kind of planning this, is, I had a couple come to me, a husband and a wife, and the wife was like, cool, help me get this concept. I said, these are the ideas, and I'm going to let you run with, like, because we have very similar ideas about, because the science is pretty sound. It's not that complicated. The human body is not that complicated, people, but we tend to overcomplicate it. And there's very little agreement. And then people argue about the semantics and the nuances. And it takes away from, like, if you just do X, Y, Z, which we're going to talk about, you'll probably be pretty good, and you can probably retire, physical retirement, pretty darn well. So the husband was like, I know I'm not going to do this thing. You can send me workouts, but like, I need to come see you once a week. And I was like, cool, I can provide that service. But wife was like, I got this. Let me check in like 2 months. Cool. What do I change? Cool. I'll see you in another 2-3 months. So let's throw it back to you of like, what have you been seeing? What have you been doing? We talked about a little before the call, but I'd love to share with the folks of how you're incorporating this stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's a similar approach that you and I like to take. I think you and I represent the silent middle majority. Like you and I don't waste our time. Maybe I'm missing some of your like comments on other people's things, but like you and I don't waste our time about the fringe arguments. We kind of just want to lean up what's in the middle and give that to people because there is a lot of kind of okay. I'm gonna this is the way my mind works, which is pretty fun. Welcome to the ride that you're about to go on. But I'm gonna argue with myself for a second. One on this side is we have an obesity crisis. People don't move enough. Like any movement's good movement. So just shut up. Like we're on the same team. Then on the other side, when people are posting videos that not just for me, if there's not science on the situation, knock yourself out. Say it's your theory or even don't, opinion or whatever. But when there is sound science and people are kind of going against that, then I get a little like annoyed. But in general, again, to go back to my previous point, like they're getting people moving, like so maybe they're getting people moving in a way that doesn't necessarily do the thing that they say that they're doing. Whatever. They're burning some calories, they're pumping some blood. So it's kind of like probably a net win, except when they end up getting hurt, which is a whole nother can of worms. So with all that being said, I think, and
well, I'll jump in real quick if that's okay. I don't want to throw off your momentum, but
it's your podcast.
I do, I do. I'm a humble host, facilitator of conversation. I do want to throw in there based on what you just said. Yeah, I love that whole concept, but I do think that's where I do get in there of like, are folks wasting their time? It's better to be moving than not. But if you have the motivation, let's talk about this married couple for a second. If you have this motivation, they're ready to go. They just need the thing that's going to help them the most. And it's not breaking any HIPAAs or anything like that. But the concept that the husband had low testosterone. So I was like, don't waste your time doing these things because that's not going to help your testosterone. Whereas someone on Instagram might be selling it as whatever. And so it's like, no, you need to lift some weight and that's it.
Things,
and like, we need
lift heavy things,
lift heavy things. And like, and to him, that was very foreign. And I said, okay, well, here's how we're going to get there. But I do think it's important to push back on a little bit of that nuance. I agree when we're talking really, really big picture. Yes. If you're moving, that's 99% of the struggle to get you off the couch, get you doing something. But again, there's the fun saying of the heaviest weight in the gym is the front door. And like, again, I don't mean to make that the voice. I always do the voice when I'm making fun of people, but it's a real thing. But at the same time, again, there's people in the gym that are motivated and they might be working with a personal trainer. And I actually had to recently join a Globo gym. And I see the personal trainer taking people through workouts and I'm like, some of the stuff I'm like, okay, cool. Other stuff I'm like, questionable, but yes, they're moving, they're doing something. Is that the best use of their time? Maybe not. So I'll throw it back to you. I wanted to just throw that like more, whatever you want to call it.
That's the nuance. That's the thing. Like I totally agree with everything you just said. And so for me, and I wish I could tell you who exactly it was, probably Pavel, but saying that you want, I think it was Pavel on the podcast said like you want students.
Pavel Satsuin.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even going to try
for anyone. Yeah, Satsuin.
Yeah. Like I think he said you want students, not clients. And so that's what I'm lucky and I'm at a place in my career where I can choose who I work with. And so I'm always looking for students. So I started doing my S&C, people who just come to me for strength and conditioning, who are just, they're not hurt. They just want to get stronger, more powerful, better conditioned. And those people I've started to take maybe the first 10, 15 minutes and just kind of like lock the whole, just put the whole body out there to them. Just break out a big old whiteboard and just start going for it. So I figured maybe we use this time to kind of almost give you a peek into what that might look like. Because if you can't work with me, you can't work with Bo, whatever, at least then you're getting some good quality information. And I will say that I intentionally am oversimplifying this. And I think that that's okay, but it's still safe, efficient, and effective, which are the things that I'm shooting for in every session. So without further ado, I'll start taking you kind of through how the body is. And if you want any, we won't have time. This could be a long conversation, but there are videos where I cover in depth some of these topics more, and then maybe we'll touch on some of the stuff at the end. So in general, my pyramid of health starts
before you do that, because I know you have it ready. I'm not going to throw off your momentum, but
no.
I just want to cue this up is a little bit more for folks, is that from this point on, if you just listen to this man, he's giving you the tools, the guidebook, the user's manual to what you probably need to do for yourself. And I think, again, this is 10:52 on the clock here, but from here on, Steve is going to rock and roll with a nice guideline that we already kind of talked about the bones of it before going live. And so I think it's going to be super duper clean. So if you guys want, okay, this is the point, and I'm really bad at like cutting it and all that stuff later on in post. But I just wanted to set that up if you just follow this, you're probably, again, better than 95% of programs out there.
Sure.
Dare I say.
So let's say, there's three different kind of whiteboards that I'll have set up. And the first one is what's called my Foundations of Fire. So Fire is my brand. We'll just say what I do is functional integrated resistance exercise. It's a cool acronym. People like acronyms. I like the word FIRE, whatever. So in those foundations, you have at the bottom of that pyramid, you have health. Then on top of that, you have movement. Then you have exercise. And then at the top, it's 8 foundations of performance. So it's 8 foundations of health, movement, exercise, performance. And to take you through all of those, and I'll work this into a practical workout. At the bottom, that's more going to be your homework and lifestyle stuff. So that's the things that you consume. So your hydration, your diet and digestion, sleep, stress is also in there, exercise ergonomics, and then the stuff that makes us a little hippie-ish, which is like the breathing and connection. So in general, that's going to fit at, we'll say, the homework section or the 5th step of your workout. And I'm going to lay this out by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to a complete workout. And then we'll dial into some of the things a little bit more. The thing that's on top of that, because I feel like if you don't have some of that dialed in, it makes the rest of the pyramid harder, is movement. So movement, the foundation.
Isn't that the whole point of the pyramid, that you
I
need
would
to
assume
stack
so.
each foundation?
In nowadays, in 2023, anything can mean anything. I don't even know anymore. So it's great. So movement is what's on top of that. And that's the next thing I do. And that's kind of where I would say this pyramid almost like started almost from the inside out. But that's where I do a physical screening, and you can check this out on YouTube. It's super easy to just take yourself through the screen. But that's where I'm looking at a few different things in a deep dive. The first thing is, it is all, I don't know, I've been a PT for like 15, 16 years. I don't even know anymore. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people. It's the most common physical impairments. And when I say physical impairments, I mean lack of strength, lack of range of motion that I've seen throughout my entire career. So first and foremost, we're going to look at your ankles. We're going to look at your toes. We're going to look at your hip rotation. We're going to look at your middle back extension. We're going to look at your neck range of motion. Just every single, now I'm not saying every person, but I see a ton of people, and those are things that just keep on coming up and up and up and up and up. So all built into a really easy screen. That's the first thing that I'll say that it gives you with the 8 foundations movement. The second thing that I think is equally important is it does a really, really deep dive into your core. Now, for me, the core, and I know this is different from what you and I learned in school. It's evolved over the years. I like where it's going. I'm going to keep on pushing it forward, actually. I'm going to say your core is everything from your neck to your knees, which includes 12 major muscle groups. So for those, you don't need to know these, but I'll kind of give you the term, scientific term, and the layman's term. Is that means your trunk flexors, which is mean forward bending, trunk extensors, backward bending, trunk side benders, meaning like sliding your hand down your leg, trunk rotators. I think everybody knows what rotation is. Then your hip, which has 6 major muscle groups. Your hip flexors, meaning like your knee to your chest, extensors, thigh behind your body, abductors, leg coming away from the body, adductors, also known as your groin, bringing it closer to, hip external rotators, where you're like spinning your leg out, hip internal rotators, spinning it in. So now we've already hit 6 plus 4. We've gotten 10 of those 12 major muscle groups. The other two that I think are really, really important too is the ability to stabilize your shoulder and shoulder blade forward, kind of like on top of a push up, or backwards, like pulling your shoulders back and together, something like in like a wall angel, or if you're laying on the ground trying to like create tension by burying everything into the ground. So those are 12 muscle groups of the core. What do you think about that, Bo?
I was going to jump in and say, for folks out there who work with personal trainers or therapists or anyone to build this, or even if you're just getting a generic program online or from Men's Health or whatever, the wherever you're getting it from, I think that if you can get a system like this somewhere in your vicinity, because I find a lot of times my big complaint or criticism when people come to me, whether it's as a PT when they have an injury, because they missed a really major component of fitness, and one of these may be movement patterns, where it also, to call out, since we're both PTs, I think we can call out our profession here. A lot of times it's like, this guy's deadlifting 400 pounds. He hurt his back. Well, your glutes are weak, sir. Because in an isolated position, we tested them, and like, well, the guy can deadlift maybe 500 pounds. And I've had guys who are very strong, not just guys and girls. And is there something to be said about that? Or are we, again, needing to put the pieces together? And again, Steven's given out a big kind of concept, again, over audio, whether you're watching this on video. We're not going and like pointing out each muscle. And that's not necessarily the point. The point is to come back to it, that if you have a system at least in place to make sure you're not deficient. I always equate this to getting your blood work done at your primary care doctor, and it's saying, hey, your vitamin D level is 31, and technically that's within range, because the range is 30 to 100 for anyone who's familiar with vitamin D levels, but optimal might be 60 to 80. And so even though you're not in like a disease risk yet, from the conventional medical system, we're talking, you're a little, you're fine. You're not abnormal. It's not a red thing on when you look down the thing, but at the same time, we need to be able to look at all these different levels and have a bigger conversation of like, okay, cool, you have a game plan. Let's make sure everything is set for your drive from Los Angeles to New York. Is another one of my favorite analogies. Is like, that's the path you want to take. You want to drive, from Los Angeles to New York. That's northeast. You're driving in that direction. So if you're off by 1 degree, you might miss New York. And that might be okay. Maybe there's something beautiful in Virginia. I don't know. But anyway, that's my thoughts is we're talking about a somewhat complicated system. And the point is, if whoever you're working with, and I'll throw this one out there real quick too, is, and you've probably heard this kind of breakdown, is the human body can basically do 7 things. Right. And this kind of fits into your system. Your system goes a little deeper, which is not wrong or right. It's just different. And so the simple way to break it down that I like to go off of is the lower body can lunge, hinge, and squat. The upper body can push and pull, and we can go further down of vertical, horizontal, all these different versions. But those are the 5 main kind of movement patterns of the upper and lower body. And then the 6th would be twisting, and the 7th would be gait and running. And so those are kind of the 7 primal movement patterns, is how I've heard those described. There's a couple different practitioners and people on social media that kind of build off of those concepts. And that's kind of how I simplify, but then I end up going down the path. We're saying, like, again, hip internal rotation is something that I think down the line, if you're missing, is going to lead to a possible total hip replacement. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
I'm with it. And you actually took me into a really nice segue there. So with those being like the 8 financial movement, what's important, because when you're doing the assessment, at minimum, you're going to figure out asymmetries. So my goal is to, when I have a client, in front of me, is like, tell you where you're at versus the norm. but you're telling me where you're at side to side. Because I remember Greg Cook said this was like 15 years ago when he was still teaching FMSs like himself, and I was at the course, and he's like, it's not two tight hamstrings that gives someone a problem. It's one tight hamstring. It's not two weak quads that gives someone, it's one weak quad. And that's, that always stuck with me. So with that being said, now on top of that, wow, what a nice segue from you, is the 8 foundations of exercise. So for me, I have 8, which is very close to your 7, is core is first. Again, anytime that you're hitting one of those 12 major muscle groups, I think you're doing a core exercise, which is great. Again, neck to the knees, everything in between those 12 major muscle groups. So something that's hitting like 1, 2, or 3 of those, to me, is defined as like a core exercise. Then squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, locomotion, rotation are my other, where I round it out. So it's exactly, and it used to be like, you could see the shirts and stuff. It was like squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry, I think was how I first saw
carry is one that, I've seen that.
And I switched it to locomotion because I felt like it could be carries, but then also like just moving in general, locomotion defined as point A to point B is another almost like class of exercises, if you will, and that should be included. And then rotation, like a lot of people were actually like almost getting famous off being like, well, there's no rotation in there. I'm like, well, then I'll just put it into my list and you got to shut up. So that's where I'm at. Then on top of that is your 8 foundations of performance. So again, we did our health at the bottom. That's like the lifestyle stuff. A good physical assessment is the next thing that comes with 8 foundations of movement. On top of that is your 8 foundations of exercise. That's the core: squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, locomotion, rotation. And then on top of that, your performance, where I hit your energy systems first. So like I'll say 12 seconds, minute 20, 12 minutes, which is like, we'll dive into those. You can do those all by running or anything that's total body, like an assault bike or concept. I guess Versa Climber, I think, is a little bit better. Then you got your jumping, which broad and vertical, then cutting, catching, throwing, and we'll say, like, I call it like the 4 R's. Like, you need to be able to remember something, read, react, and do all that rapidly.
What about arithmetic?
Yeah, exactly. You got to do arithmetic. So that's everything.
I'll jump in and say, again, even for me, like, it's like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And obviously, again, I've seen it on paper. I've taken folks through this. Yeah. So anyone listening, again, it can be a lot of stuff. We're kind of, again, trying to lay it all out as much as possible in the audio format, again, sometimes, and video as well. It can still feel like a lot, but we're trying to simplify it. So we're just laying out the groundwork. So I'm throwing back to you of just reaffirming that it is simple at the end of the day.
Yeah. So then that's your like, all right, thanks, Steve. You just like said a bunch of words, but does this help me build a workout? And I will say to you, that's right. So now I'm going to take you through, for me, the 5 steps to a quality workout. Again, it's like, I'm not trying to make a stupid acronym because I think there's too many, but it's like safe, effective, and efficient. Like, that's it. Like, see, I don't know what it came to me, so it helped me remember it, but I don't think I'll ever say this again in public. So that's great. So safe, efficient, and effective is what I'm going for. Great. So the first thing, though, super duper simple: break a sweat. I think that gets your tissues, your tendons, like raise your tissue temperature, get your tendons ready, get your muscles ready to go, gets the heart pumping. And then also like get your nervous system like just going a little bit. Like, hey, we were sitting on a couch and we're no longer sitting on a couch. Break a sweat. That can be anything as like simple as dancing, some jumping jacks if that's appropriate. Jump on your favorite total body cardio, anything elliptical. I don't, like with whatever. I don't really care. This is a simple one, and we will waste no more time talking about it. The next thing, step 2, is your corrective exercises. So that's all based on what came up in your 8 foundations of movement that we were just talking about before. So that second tier of the pyramid, or that second row of the pyramid. So let's say in that we found out that you had a reduced left hip internal rotation, and that your posterior chain or your glute and your hamstring on the right side don't fire all that well, and your middle back doesn't extend particularly well. So in that time, we'll do things that include, like, again, it's like our like the branding of like a fire release, fire stretch, and fire train. So the release is that's actually where, like, as a PT, I'm not like, that's where I'll put my hands on it. I'm a certified manual physical therapist. Like, I may not do it as much as I used to, but that's still like very comfortable for me. So I will do some sort. And when I say release, I know it's not scar tissue. I know whatever you can do with whatever you have to make yourself move just a little bit better, I will call as a release and leave it at that. Then the next thing is like stretching, but obviously active whenever possible. For some people, like starting with a day or two of passive stretching, I don't think like turns them into dust. I think you can like work your way into it, but something that's active and something that like very quickly gets the antagonistic muscles firing up. Is it end range? Like there's been a good push towards, I would say, active stretching, and I am totally on board with that. And even better, if you can get something now, the next thing is like to retrain that. So now you have a new range. Worst thing I can do is be like, all right, see you later. You need to help that person develop some sort of neuromuscular control and strength, meaning like your brain's going to be like, what do I do with this new 2 or 3 range of hip internal rotation? And if you don't tell it that it's there, one, you're not going to get to keep it. And if you don't tell it that it's there, there's a chance that you like go into that range when you're out there on the hockey rink and you end up actually having some trouble. So for me, again, that's the release, the stretch, and the train is all those corrective exercises to clean up your 8 foundations of movement. So that's step 2. Step 3, I do a core 360. That means that I'm hitting all 12 major muscle groups of the core at least one time. It's not like I'm doing 12 different exercises, but a side plank gets your trunk side benders and your hip abductors. So congratulations, I just did that. Now I got both of those knocked out. I'm doing a high plank where I bring my leg across. So then that's getting your scap and shoulder anterior, your trunk flexors. When I take one point of stability away, get some anti-rotation work as well. And depending on what I do with my knee, I can either be working the hip flexors or the adductors. So that's what I'm looking for, is like, for me, depending on where the person's at, that can either be as quick as like 3 different exercises to kind of hit them all. Or if someone's like, you know, a little slower to getting into their lifts and maybe he's been dealing with an injury more recently, that could take like 6 to 8 minutes, but still nothing too crazy. So again, step 1, break a sweat, super easy. I don't care how you do it, frankly. Step 2 is your corrective exercises, clean up whatever came up in that physical assessment. Step 3 is your core 360, like really get every one of those circuit breakers to turn on so that you're ready to go. And then the 4th step is your work sets, which is like what I think everyone kind of starts with, but I wish that they would just do a little bit more of the 3 things that I said before. And that's where you're getting, so your 8 foundations of exercise, which we talked about before, was like your core, and then the other 7 big ones that you were talking about. That's where you already hit your core. So you're going to get the rest of the 8 foundations of exercise, where you're going to be doing your squats, your hinges, your lunges, your push, pull, locomotion, and rotation. And if you've earned it, and I mean this sincerely, then you get to do the 8 foundations of performance in there. That's where you can dial up some energy system stuff. You can do some jumping, you can do some cutting, but I really think that you have to have some sort of underlying ability in the 8 foundations of exercise to almost test into the 8 foundations of performance. Whew.
Yeah.
That last one, 5, is your homework. Your homework, and this is super easy for me and you to say, like, no PT is going to give me guff about this, but it's your home exercise program. Like your correctives that you just did after you broke a sweat, but before you hit your core, is what you're going home with as your homework. Just hit those. Like that's going to address your physical impairments and your problems most directly. And then whatever you need to clean up, and I say just pick one thing, but you have something likely in your 8 foundations of health. Again, that was like the lifestyle stuff that you should be focusing on. Not 2, not 3, just pick one. That's all you really got to do. And that is a quality workout that's safe, effective, efficient. I'm out.
I love it. I love it. You're out?
Okay. The lavalier mic. 18 minutes. That's pretty good.
That's awesome.
But I'm not done yet, but yeah, we'll still go.
So yeah, let's put a little bow on that. Put a bow on it. So number 1, something that I want to highlight for folks, or 2 big takeaways, actually. 1, a major component to that is getting assessed and having someone take you through some kind of screen. And again, we're not saying, I think we're agnostic about what the screen is, but if your personal trainer is like, all right, great, you want to lose some weight, let's go. And just starts you there without understanding, again, how your hips move. Does it have to be by a physical therapist? No, that's not the standard, but it's something we as a profession should be doing better at. That's a whole nother conversation. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting an assessment, you're not getting some kind of personalization, I think that's a major piece to that pyramid where, again, if you're just jumping into Orange Theory or CrossFit or Peloton, which are the more common types of workouts. Again, better than nothing, but that's where we're saying, hey, spend whatever it is, $1,000 a year getting assessed, getting some body work, getting check-ins with someone like Steve in person, someone like me in person. That's what we do. That's one of the big things that I think is vital without turning this into a sales pitch. Because it doesn't have to be us. We're not going to be there for everyone in person, but we really, really think it's vital. And I'll say, at least I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from hearing your system is saying assessment is a huge part of that. I have my other podcast with my buddy David Corona in New York City, personal trainer up on the Upper East Side. And we did an episode called this very first episode was Demand Better from Personal Trainers. And the number one thing we said is, hey, if there's no assessment, walk out the door. Like this guy, the person, the girl, the gal, the non-binary person does not know what they're doing. And again, that's an oversimplification, but if there's no assessment, then you're probably getting a cookie cutter approach. We've been around the industry. We've seen it, unfortunately, and the assessment is vital. So I don't know if you want to, if there's that.
Like you want, and listen, I wear like warm-up pants 361 days a year, but like you want a tailored suit. You don't want to be like walking around in a hand-me-down that was just like made for someone else. Like take this. It's not like it takes that long. I screened like 10 athletes in like 45 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. Like, and if I do a one-on-one, it's like 20, 25 minutes maybe. If you do it for yourself off the videos, it's still pretty quick. It's like a half an hour maybe. So yeah, with that being said, I think the next question that would obviously rise, like, all right, well, you told me to squat, hinge, lunge, and do things like that. Like, well, how do I program that? And I'm going to give you the answer for someone that's trained, because I think, and tell me what, and this is where I wanted your nuance kind of added, but like, obviously to like drive up strength and power, the lower, like the 3 to 5 reps, and we'll get into how this fits in the system soon, research wise tends to drive that up the best. But like, I'm not going to have someone day one who hasn't trap bar deadlifted get that low in their sets, because I think they're still just learning. So I don't really have a problem with taking them to 10 and then using almost like reps in reserve as my guide. Where do you start?
Yeah, and again, depends on if we're in person or if we're online, and how. So my system that I'm gonna counter you with, and again, this is the beauty of these conversations, is hopefully we can add and take away and refine all these things to evolve our own systems. So we start with competence, and are you competent in that movement? So if you're in a gym and you do a lat pull down, most people are going to be competent with that. And then again, whatever those movements are, squat, I think most people, that's one of the last things I will add into a program is a squat. So because I think there's more complexity, and most likely if we have tested any imbalance between left and right, then we might have a problem. We might have a deficiency. We might be causing more damage by doing a two-legged movement when one-legged movement is not balanced. As you said, the things from Gray Cook, for anyone who hasn't checked him out, great resource for human movement stuff. So bottom line for me is, yeah, I'll and again, from the research, old school CSCS, which I got certified with those guys 2009, I want to say, is that neurological lighter weight, stay in that 5 out of 10 effort, whether we talk about RPE, rate of perceived exertion, reps in reserve, RIR, whichever way we're looking at that, I'd like to start out there. And the big things for me there is I like to give little rules of, you cannot feel anything in your low back. You need to be feeling this in the back of your shoulders. Like if you're doing a lat pull down, maybe you feel some bicep, maybe you feel a hot elbow. Now we need to have that conversation. But that's why I like the online format for working with clients, because I can say, hey, go do this, report back what you're feeling. What are you noticing? You have a chance to leave me notes. Those things are what's going to help me determine, are we on the right path? Plan of care from physical therapy speak, if you will, for the insurance companies, which is not what we're talking about here. But so I do like to start out in that higher rep volume. 3 sets of 10 is kind of the joking. It's almost a cliche, but there's a reason that's what every physical therapist pretty much gives out. 3 sets of 10, because it is a nice place to build movement, groove the patterns, You're not necessarily making a lot of progress there in the strength building, in the long-term building. But generally, in my high school program, I'll finish off with this thought is, we did the bigger, faster, stronger program, which is it's and the fancy term here, guys, is linear progression. And so you start out with maybe 3 sets of 15 of whatever the move is, and you can again mix and match the moves and movement patterns that we've already laid out. 3 sets of 15 the first week, then you go to 3 sets of 12 the next week, then you go to 4 sets of 10, then you go all the way down to 4 sets of 6. Again, you talked about that 3 to 5 reps might be where we really make a lot of that those leaps and bounds. But again, back to my system, competence is where we start. Confidence is the second stage. So I have to have confidence in you lifting and trap bar deadlifting or whatever the move is. And then you need to have that confidence of like, hey, do I know where I'm feeling this? Okay, if I feel it in my back, I know to stop. I'm not going to push through a shitty rep. And then so competence, confidence, and then and only then in my system do we start talking about capacity and saying how much can you 5 rep max deadlift? And how often do we need to push to 1 rep maxes for it? It's not for everyone. So that's another part of that science and research, risk reward, another fun part of this conversation. So there's my rant.
Yeah, I like it. So, and that's the thing is, I think when when you're learning a new movement, even if it looks good right away, I can catch flack for this, and that's okay. But I tend not to load it up a ton in me. I just kind of want their body to just feel it and do it.
We call that neurological adaptation more than the
That's the
strength
thing. And that's the thing. When I'm talking about 3x5, and now I'm going to go through my like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of like work sets, we'll say, which was that fourth step in that workout. Again, the break a sweat, corrective exercises, core 360, work sets. Now we're going to dial into that. I'll make that as easy as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, but if you're not in that 3 to 5 range, I think you're still getting that neurological drive, even if when someone's, especially when they're like deconditioned and untrained. Like there's 2 big differences in research from like what works for untrained individuals, pretty much like you said, opening the heaviness of opening that door into the gym will make them bigger, faster, stronger. But then you do reach a point where you kind of got to dial on the science a little more. And that's what I'm talking about now. So again, to make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is for your work sets. Let's go 1, 2. So I oversimplify the energy systems. One, it needs to go without saying, so like the aerobic system is what refuels everything else. So that's your big gas tank. So saying like anaerobic versus aerobic training, I understand it.
Before you go there, I'm going to jump the gun because I think I know where you're going. And Dr. Andy Galpin, who's one of my favorite folks to listen to in this space, and he's been on a bunch of cool podcasts.
Yeah, he's rocking.
And so he simplifies this. And again, sorry if this steals some of your the hot air balloon wind thing. We have hot air balloons that leave here. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but so he breaks it down to you want one really long, slow duration, whatever that means for you, 20, 30, 40, an hour, minutes, steady state cardio. Zone 2 is another thing that gets thrown around. Dr. Peter Attia just came out with a new book called Outlive. He talks about hitting that zone 2 different amounts of time. And if we're talking about longevity versus building fitness versus building performance that Steve talked about there. So back to Dr. Andy Galpin's thing. 1, long, slow, sustained heart rate, high heart rate, whatever you want to call it. Then you have your really super duper intense. So short bouts, whether we want to throw all the fancy words around it, but that high intensity interval, I don't even think that always qualifies for there because we're not really hitting those the highest peaks of what we're supposed to be doing. And then whatever you want to call that middle ground, the Goldilocks method of maybe a CrossFit workout, if you want to call it that, 15 minutes, maybe mixed modal training would be a fun one, 3 moves, a triplet. But whatever that is, that heart rate kind of plays in that middle zone. So super high intense, super long, slow duration, and then that middle ground. So that's how he simplifies it. So I don't know if you have a little bit of a difference from that.
A little bit different. I think just from going from, because that is almost one layer below. When we were talking about assessments, for me, and I'm saying this to anyone else who's out there, if you want to get a little bit of a sense of your different energy systems, and again, everything's aerobic, but let's break it down using the more traditional breakdown. So your fastest one, again, this is the 1-2. We're going to do all our energy systems in 1-2, and then we'll get to 3-4-5 later. But 1-2, so 12 seconds. Get on an assault bike, go all out for 12 seconds. That'll give you a reasonable predictor of where your alactic anaerobic system is. Now, that's towards the high end, so it's more like a capacity thing, but that's going to go there. Now, the next thing, again, 1-2, 1 minute, 20 seconds. Get on that same assault bike, preferably like another day, and go all out for 1 minute 20. That's that lactic anaerobic system. You another day, come back, go 12 minutes on it. See what your average wattage is for that. That's going to give you a reasonable indicator of where your aerobic system is. So in maximizing those different energy systems lies what you just talked about. So if you want to maximize your aerobic capacity, you will do a mix of long, slow duration, but you also want to do maybe some cardiac power intervals, maybe something where you're going like 90 seconds all out, then recovering to 120 beats per minute, then hitting it again, hitting again. It's a great way to not make friends with your clients, but it's helpful because if you think of the heart as kind of two different ways, and listen, the heart may not be as malleable later into life as we all hoped that it would be, but to make it in its simplest form, when you're doing that long, steady duration, that's cardiac output method. So that means that we're trying to get that left ventral to like almost stretch out just a little bit, whereas there's other things that are going on, but that's what we're hoping to happen, that sort of hypertrophy where it's actually getting a little bit bigger, eccentric hypertrophy. But you also like, it's a muscle that's throwing blood out. You want to like kick it, like get on, like merge on the highway and floor it and see if you can get a little bit extra power out of that. That's that cardiac power method and doing those intervals. So what you're talking about is like almost like one layer lower and ways that you would maximize each of those energy systems. So now I just talked about the energy systems. I'll kind of talk a little bit easy. So I think we just talked about,
No, I don't know. I don't know the best place to cut you off, but I want to throw in there a big picture piece here where and I think it's a good question for you because I have some thoughts on this, is it's easy to creep and lose some of these things. And we start to notice this as we age. And so I think a lot of the folks listening here are probably going to be somewhere in this aging demographic, whatever that means. But a lot of times it's like, oh, I found it's just really hard to go up that flight of stairs or something. Like it used to be pretty easy and now it's gotten harder. Or outside of, again, the orthopedic things, when we're talking about the aerobic piece, it's like, yeah, I used to be able to go for 40-minute walk. Now when I get to like 20 minutes, I got to stop and maybe sit down, or, those things can creep. And we're talking about just like checking your cholesterol, checking your blood pressure, checking all these vital signs that our doctors talk about, our primary care docs. We're talking about adding these fitness vital signs that if we can stay ahead of that, and again, that's where the assessment piece comes in. And like Steve said, is like, you can do those assessments yourself. You don't even need to come see a specialist. But, looking at your 12-minute Cooper test of how far can you go, like that's a pretty standardized thing. Is that something you need to do? Like maybe it's a good test. And again, like you said, that's a good way to get your clients to hate you. But if you're not pushing yourself to those limits of testing, then yeah, we might be missing out on some very, very important data. So that's my question for you is, what are some of the top tests we could be doing outside of building the program? Because if we have programs, should we not be seeing that it's improving? This is where CrossFit, I was in that world for a while. I give them credit because you're getting these tests somewhere in the mix. And so whether it's every year you have the Open, which is the worldwide national or the worldwide kind of big fitness competition, but you're also saying you have these kind of standard tests for anyone who's familiar. You have Cindy and Angie, and there was a whole alphabetical hurricane system. Angie, Barbara, Cindy, Diane, Elizabeth, Fran, you have the whole system. So, but if every time you do that test, there are a bunch of different batteries of tests. And so when you would do that same exact workout, which was 21, 15, 9 of pull-ups and thrusters or whatever the workout is, If your score went from 4 minutes down to 3 minutes, you've just gotten fitter. If your score went from 4 minutes to 5 minutes, you've probably gotten a little bit less fit. But those are all things that need to factor into that conversation. And maybe it's gotten less fit on this thing, but then it got really better on another workout. Grace, for instance, 30 clean and jerks at 135 pounds. So whatever that is, I think I'll throw it back to you. What are some of those batteries of tests, and how often should people be testing in this system? Or is it just, hey, we got a plan, keep going until something changes?
Yeah, I think it's pretty. I think it stays the same. Almost my answer for, I think doing 12 seconds all out with something total body is worth your while. That's not going to make anybody hate you.
Yeah, for sure. So you don't care about the numbers or tracking wattage or anything like that.
No, I mean that the wattage, the average wattage or the max wattage are the two things I'm going to look at for that. But anyone can do that. Like
Right.
there's no barrier of entry for the alactic anaerobic. There's no barrier of entry for the lactic anaerobic at 120. Just get on an assault bike or go sprint. I don't care what it is. Just go for it. The aerobic capacity, like if people are runners and they're running, I'll have them do a 12-minute Cooper run test. If not, I'll have them do a 6-minute modified Cooper run test. I'm sorry, a 6-minute modified Cooper test on the assault bike.
Yeah.
Get the average wattage from that, and you can kind of convert. It's not perfect, but it's fine. I'll have them do a 2K on the Concept 2 rower, which is like very easy. That's even like, actually, I think probably the assault bike's the most benign of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like run if they run, but if not, like, the Concept 2 rower, if they're kind of like used to rowing, but maybe it's like somebody who was like a back patient, like it's hard to argue with doing the modified Cooper test. It's great. But then if that's like not even in the lexicon, like we're talking about almost like a different generation who's not athletic, there's a lot of non-maximal VO2 tests that track heart rate recovery that are decent. Like YMCA has a step test and things like that. I guess from my population, most people are comfortable with doing 6 minutes, not comfortable, nobody's happy about it, but like can tolerate 6 minutes on the bike. And I feel like the max tests are just a little bit more accurate. I think that has been proven in the research,
Sure.
but it's not like they're like worlds apart from each other. So if a max
and
test
how often do you test that?
So I'll test them pretty early. And then I usually, because I'll do the cardiac power interval. So a lot of people aren't, from me, in the 75th. I want people in the 75th percentile for their VO2 max for their age.
Just real quick for anyone listening, VO2 max is the ability for the body to bring in oxygen, push out carbon dioxide, how well you synthesize energy. And you tell me if you have a different definition of that, but
no, that's great.
Pretty sure that's
Yeah.
and traditionally the way that's done, the gold standard I'd say is you put a mask on, and it's tracking that carbon dioxide oxygen exchange, and there are different levels depending on, again, fitness level and different things like that. But in terms of getting on a treadmill, building up speed, building up incline, things like that, where we want to challenge folks in a way that if you're pushing the limits, you should be pretty, like, again, going to that point where you have to tap out and quit. I think, again, the best test is the one where you collapse at the end. That would be the most accurate, where I know back in the day they would have like mattresses behind the treadmill and like just keep going until you literally collapse.
Yeah, totally. And wherever you're at on that spectrum is totally cool. So that I will test them early on. It's a little bit of a like, I'm not saying it's meant to be totally as a motivational tool, but like I care about my patients and I want them to live a long life. And if they don't have a decent VO2 max, the odds are not in their favor.
Yeah,
and
it's
so,
one of the, just to jump in, it's one of the top indicators of longevity is how well you can bring in oxygen, push out carbon dioxide is one of the absolute top correlates to living longer and living a better quality of life.
Right. So I'm kind of saying to you, like, listen, this is more than just your shoulder that we're really concerned about. So I'll pop them on the assault bike pretty early, but because I think that long, slow duration cardio is such an important part of that, I will let them address some of it on their own and then kind of come back to me when they're like, hey, Steve, I'm starting to feel a little bit like bitter. You mind if we do that test again? Or I'll prompt them around like 2 months and be like, hey, how's that going? If they're like, I haven't been able to do any of it, I'm not going to retest them. What's the point? It's not going to be any better. So that's kind of how I approach it with that. I do it very early on, and then I will reassess almost when they're like, yo, I think I'm ready to reassess because I've actually been doing the things that you wanted me to be doing. So that's your 12 seconds, minute 20, 12 minutes, and they all get driven up with different things. I look at it kind of in like a Joel Jameson way. Again, with like almost oversimplified, but as capacity and power. Capacity is almost, we would say, like the ability to the repeatability, and the power is almost the ceiling that you could have in that system. So if I'm doing intervals with that sort of thing, so again, like we're doing just the 1 2 1 2 1 2. So we'll say for the 12-minute system, the aerobic system, I think long steady duration and cardiac power, like two really easy things. There are other things you can be doing like tempo training and stuff like that, and threshold training, where you kind of find where you're at that threshold between like anaerobic and aerobic, and just kind of hover there, and that'll start to drive that window up a little bit. You can also do some tempo training, which is like slower lifts, which actually works pretty well when people are learning lifts, but they're pretty grueling. Again, targeting more that like type 1 aerobic fibers because you're doing the lifts super slow. But then for the 12-second and the minute 20, I look at it two different ways. So I think if I want to drive up the power, I'm going to go for half of the, we'll say, like total duration of that system. So if I want to do a alactic anaerobic power interval, I'm going to do it for 6 seconds, but then I'm going to give them a full recovery. I'm going to let them recover down to 120 beats per second and then go again. Some people are really conditioned, and that 120 is almost like a little, it's like their heart rate doesn't get that crazy high. But in general, I want them to be fully recovered. Go for it again. If you want to work at capacity, I'll go the full duration, so 12 seconds, but I'll give them a minute 20 rest. So for me, an incomplete rest is a minute 20. So then we're going to hit that. Then if we're doing the minute 20, which is 80 seconds, 60 plus 20, we'll do 40 seconds, all you got. But because you want all you got, I'll give you a full recovery down to 120 beats per minute. But if I want to get that capacity, that repeatability, I'm going to have a shortened rest of a minute 20, and I'm going to have them go for the full duration. So it's 120 on, 120 off, 120 on, 120 off. So that's how I kind of program those intervals. But if you don't have your 12-minute Cooper run test in the 75th, I tend not to focus on the other energy systems because I want to just build the biggest gas tank that I can before I start worrying about how I'm going to allocate it. So that's your first three in your foundations of performance, assuming you've like kind of tested into that stuff. That's where I think that you can, I think you can do those assessments as much as you want. I just don't know if it makes sense for you to focus on improving them if you don't have some of the other things in. Now I'll take it through kind of the 3, 4, 5. So when we're talking about strength and power with conditioned athletes, super simple. You brought up Andy Galpin. He's not the one who came up with it, but I think he's the one who popularized it more recently. I know Pavel, again, Satsoulian has talked about it. It was mentioned in some other literature, so I am by no means taking credit for this, but 3x5. 3 to 5 days a week, 3 to 5 exercises, 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 minute rest. It's so simple to remember. Again, if you're trained and if you're at that level, that's pretty decent for your strength and power work. Now, the other question that I get asked a whole bunch is hypertrophy, because not everybody cares about performance. Some people just want to put on muscle mass, whether it be for longevity, another correlate, or vanity, which is totally fair. I'm from Jersey, so I really can't talk trash about it. So with that being said, when we're talking about hypertrophy, again, this is to the system. It's like on the 4th set, this is your workout. This is your 4th stage of your workout, is your work set. So what am I doing today? If you're focusing more on hypertrophy, I think if you're going to say one word for hypertrophy, it's volume. If you're going to say 2 words for hypertrophy, it's hard volume. And if you're going to say 3 words, I think it's protein plus hard volume. That's what you really need to be working for. And the hard volume is how close to failure you are. So the more current, newer research, I would say, that's coming out is saying if you're within 3 to 5 reps in reserve, and if you don't know, we kind of talked about it before, but reps in reserve means I pick up that weight, I start doing it. Once I feel like I only have 5 more in the tank, that's 5 reps in reserve. So if I could have done 15, but I stopped at 10, that's 5 reps in reserve. That 3 to 5 reps in reserve, assuming that you're getting enough sets, which we'll like get to in a second, is going to stimulate hypertrophy. Now, some of the earlier would show.
Hold on, before we lose anyone, because again, we're talking some some stuff. So if folks don't have any experience with this, and this is again where I'm making this program of Fitness Made Simple, is people who are like, I don't know what that feels like, but it's doing it. It's having that intention when you go in, and until you have someone take you through that of, hey, how many more reps? You just finished that set of 10 bicep curls with 15 pounds in each hand. How many more reps could you have done? And if the answer is like, I don't know, maybe 5 or like 2 reps, I think I could have maybe squeezed out 1 or 2 because I was starting to struggle there. Those are the conversations. Those are the learnings. Those are the intentions that these types of programs need to have in order to truly progress you, because there's good enough, but I don't want it to sound overly crazy complicated. So I just want to take a step back again
No,
every now and then to make sure people are still with us
definitely. And I know
that.
I talk fast AF. So either way, so that's it. So that's at 3 to 5 now, but you could still make a case. It's not like there's not research out there that doesn't say that 0 to 1 or 2 reps in reserve doesn't also stimulate hypertrophy. I think the conversation is, if you get that close to failure, is it harder to get quality volume? Do you end up burning yourself out sooner? And would you be better off to conserve some of your energy and just stack on more sets? And then the question is, how many sets? So to tie it all together, and if I had this drawn on the whiteboard, it's like way cooler, but the amount of sets per week per muscle group that you're looking to stimulate hypertrophy is 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, 15 sets. Shoot for 15 sets. You can probably get by with 10, but if you shoot for 15, that's going to be even better. So that's the amount of sets that you need. And then I would say 1 gram of protein per pound of weight that you have for your body. And this is it. Then I'll like throw it back to you. Don't just have like, I'm like, I don't know, I'm like 165. I'm not going to have like 0 protein throughout the day and then 165 grams of protein for dinner. Take your weight, figure out how many times you're probably going to eat that day, divide those 2 numbers together, and then that tells you how much protein you need to hit per meal, because it is better if you can spread it out. And that's how you help your body. That's it. Done.
Simple.
Solved. Health
Simple.
solved. Wait,
we got it in under an hour.
I know you like that.
Health solved. Yeah. So one of two-ish takeaways. One more that
give us the nuance, because I oversimplified and you're really good with the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and you didn't. I would say you did not oversimplify, but it was very thorough. It was very thought out. And again, I think for some people listening, depending on where you're coming from, it can sound like too much. It can be like, oh, okay, that is a super simple. Like you said, once it's laid out on the whiteboard, it can be much simpler. But again, one of those big things I want to point out is creep over time. Again, these are the things that if you don't address, it's like, hey, you're really deficient in this vitamin. Let's start giving you this, whatever it is. You're really low in testosterone, which happens pretty often to men in this time and age. So here's different ways we can start to build that testosterone. One of the number one ways to build testosterone is lift some heavy weights. So that works for men and women. Women need testosterone too. And again, all this should be with a healthcare provider somewhere in the mix. That's where we come back to assessment, individuality. But the other thing I'm taking away from everything you said is it doesn't really matter what your goals are. It's not just like, I want to lose 10 pounds. It's not, getting someone to the point of being like, I want to live to 100 years old and be doing all these great things. It's just, hey, whatever your goals are, we need you to be an athlete. We need you to be able to throw a ball. We need you to be able to hike up a thing of stairs. We need you to be able to pick up this 12-pound baby without being like, oh, my back. And we're trying to make you more resilient human being. So I think that those are important things. The other last bit I'll throw in that I think I want to sum up is, again, for a lot of folks, they might be doing Peloton or yoga or Orange Theory or CrossFit or whatever the program is, but that's not a movement practice. And I think, and again, I'll give credit to Dr. Kelly Starrett here of what is your movement practice? And it needs to have this level of like, are there any gaps in my movement? So something like yoga, the reason that's not a movement practice to us, to me, is there's a lack of certain aspects where you can be a pretty healthy person for a decent amount of time. It's not wrong. You could be a vegan, you could be a carnivore, you could do whatever you want. But I think that the movement practice needs to include a lot of this stuff, like the aerobic piece, that high sprint threshold. Like if we can put all that together, then yeah, we seem to be putting a more complete human being together, where you're less likely to have pains. And this is the term functional fitness. We haven't even said that term here because we don't, I think, care about it or use it. But that's what the whole functional fitness thing was, hey, are you ready to like, and CrossFit would always love to say, are you putting, we do the push press or the strict press because you want to put your bag in the overhead compartment. And like, sure, that's a thing. And you want to be able to reach higher and not lose shoulder function. But at the same time, like, yeah, it just needs to be part of that movement practice, not because you need to reach overhead. And that's an important thing. But at the same time, it's just, hey, shoulder function is pretty important for the things you want to do. You want to be able to wipe your own butt. You want to be able to put a shirt on without pain. All these different kind of things, and then whatever life calls for. So yeah, the part that I'll say again that I like to do to supplement a lot of people's training and sport and things like that is I'll send them these 10-minute flows. I call them bow flows. And not to sell our own thing. You got the fire.
Me too. Bit. Is that weird?
Yeah, that is weird. I appreciate it. But yeah, so we call them the bow flows, and it's like, hey, here's 3 moves. It's hitting a lot of those things Steve was talking about throughout the week. If you do 5 to 7 different bow flows or whatever the movement is, you're again hitting those different pieces. And so I have that stuff ready to go, and I just charge people like $50 a month, and boom, they have that system. They're online. They're getting an email with, here's my little 10-minute thing. If that's all I have time for. If you have 30 minutes, great. Let's do more things. Let's add to this equation. But at the end of the day, it comes back to stacking these like concepts and creating a little jigsaw puzzle of health and fitness and of health, orthopedics, all up that stuff. So that's my ramble to try to nuance and unsimplify and oversimplify and desimplify. And we're at an hour, so
we're good. Let's go get some ice cream.
Let's go get some ice cream. My baby just had a blowout, so I got to go help clean him up. But any last closing thoughts before we?
I thought we were done because you're talking about the blowout. No, that's it. I actually feel really good about the fact that I got to get all that out, because that's, again, if you chop all that down, it's like probably what I said. It's like 15 to 20 minutes. I do not regret incorporating that into my first 15 to 20 minutes because it answers the why behind the what for everything that I'm going to be doing with that person for the entire duration of our working together.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, my good friend. We took us a little while to coordinate this on Mondays. Yeah, we'll find time. And again, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything going on. If you guys have questions, if you want to reach Steve, where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the best way to get an actual hold of me. So at iHealthSciences, that's I for Integrated Health Sciences, ending with an S. It's a nice little Trinity logo. That's where I post anything. Everything else is kind of just flowing through Instagram. So, oh, wow, that's nice. Yeah, at iHealthSciences. And that's pretty much it. Our website, iHealthSciences.com. If you are studying for the CSCS, no joke, check it out. I know you're not Bo, but I know that there's a lot of people out there. So check that out because I took all my notes.
I already passed it.
Yeah, exactly. You're big time.
I don't need to do.
I took all my notes from, again, my job, I think, because my mother's an educator, is just like try and simplify stuff and teach it well. So I took all my notes, resynthesized. I actually had a really good exercise science intern at the time, and she has a really good voice and way of communicating. And she took all my notes and made it a lot more user-friendly. So check that out under Learn Fire on our website at iHealthSciences.com.
Sweet. Guys, go check it out. We'll try to link that in the show notes. Steve, you're going to send that to me. Otherwise, I will forget. So if you don't send it to me, if you guys don't see it in the show notes, that's his fault, not mine. I'm not going to blame the baby too many times. I can only use that excuse so many times. Your beard is winning right now.
Now it's humid.
I gotta
very humid right now. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, guys, go out there, get healthy. Again, if you need the 3 to 5 times a week, 3 to 5 exercises, 3 to 5 reps of each, have 3 to 5 reps in the tank. That's pretty simple. Hopefully that boils down the whole complexity of life, liberty, justice, the search for equality, equity. I don't know. 4th of July is upon us. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, thank you for sharing your wisdom, knowledge, expertise. And I hope guys got out of it. If you made it all the way through to the end here, we love you the most. And we'll see you next time. Hope you got 1% better.